Welcome, 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 everybody. How y'all doing today? Apologize for the little bit of a late start here. I was a bit late getting back home and had to fuck with my green screen and stuff. So things were a little bit late getting started because it wasn't to my liking. But as you can see, I got the lighting working now and things will look a little more crisp, so we're good on that front now.
A Lake Mary family had
Give it a couple more minute or so to get back in. Since I just blasted everybody with the fact that I'm live. Y'all doing good? Excellent. Good stuff, good stuff. Let's see, what's going on new with me? Well, before we get started, I am officially a Democratic precinct chair in Travis County. So there is that. Just wait a little bit. So yeah, that's fun. It means I'm going to be busy. I might be starting a we'll see how it goes, but I might start a local Travis County news interview channel or something in addition to this because of that, where we're going to interview people that are active within local politics here in Travis County. So that'd be Austin, Pflugerville, I think Hutto's in Travis County, Manor, and yeah, I think that's about it. So covering some things that are going on with that, both Republican and Democrat, but we'll see how it goes. Depends on what they say. So other than that, I got not much else going on here. Let's see here. Let's get. So before we get started, though, we'll like to make an announcement here. So let's go ahead and pause this here. So for those that do not know, I have been invited to Modern Day Debates, and I've been on their show twice now. debating gender, and I think that was it. Honestly, I think it was 2 shows about gender. But I've also been invited to participate in Modern Day Debate Con 4 in Dallas, Texas on November 5th. And given what I know now, and let me double check my email really quick to make sure I didn't get an email while I was traveling home from work. Making sure about this really quick. Yeah, okay, so cool. I will be debating Actual Justice Warrior. I will be debating Sean Fitzgerald, aka Actual Justice Warrior, about criminal justice, crime, causes, and possibly fixes. I don't know the exact details of what is going to be debated, because, you know, that's a live debate, so things can change based on how people react and the questions people ask and things like that. But I will be debating him live in person and as well as online when they stream that program in Dallas, Texas on November 5th. So if you are in Texas, I suggest you go to, I've been to Modern Day Debates as a participant, not a participant, but as an observer. It was a good time. You get to ask streamers questions and hang out with them depending on what ticket you've bought and that sort of thing. So it's pretty cool if you are a nerd like me and you want to get to know some streamers a little bit better. So yeah, I don't know if I'm just going to be debating Sean by myself or if I will be debating him and him with a partner against him and another partner. For him, I don't know how it's set up exactly yet, but yeah, it should be good times. So that's what's going on. Another thing that we are doing is I will be on Tiberius's Saturday Night Lights program this Saturday. That is at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll be discussing economic issues on his program. And then next week, I will be on Pondering Politics podcast on Wednesday at, I believe it's at 7 or 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But let me double check that really quick. I think it's at 8 p.m. Let's see. No, that's not it. Yeah, so I'm sorry. It's actually at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it'll go for 2 hours. So it'll be a full 2-hour show, 2-hour podcast. Excuse me, 2-hour podcast show. So we're doing more of that. And if you want to see me get on your program, you want to debate me on something, there's numerous ways to get a hold of me. Easiest by far is actually Discord. So I'm just going to heavily promote the Discord. So go ahead and join our Discord. Find me on Discord at CSP Cypher with a Y. And yeah, so that's what we're doing. But let's go ahead and now get started with the show proper. All right, welcome everybody to an episode of the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. We do this News Roundup weekly, generally speaking live on Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the news that was with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. This week we're covering a lot of things from the Supreme Court, AI, Trump stuff, Republican stuff, Biden stuff, so we're going to get into it here shortly. But before we start, we want to let you know that we are going to be changing how we're doing things for the foreseeable future on this program. We are going to change how we cover Ukraine and the economy specifically. So as both chambers of Congress come back from their summer recess, the 2024 election cycle kicks into high gear, and the Supreme Court brings us a number of cases of very high importance in its next term. Our political news comes fast and furious, as it wants to do. So we want to continue to bring you the highest quality and a more in-depth coverage we can in the time that we have. So instead of weekly segments on both Ukraine and the economy, we'll be doing those every other week and condensing those into 2-week bites. So what that means is that we'll have a bit more economy news and a bit more Ukraine news in every other week instead of just blasting you all with what's going on. This also allows us to put together a bit more analysis, especially with the economy as things start to go into 2024. More money is coming from the federal government. More corporations are paying back debt. The Federal Reserve raises or does not raise interest rates, and GDP gets reported on a monthly basis, or monthly and quarterly basis. All those things come along on regular increments, and by having our news segment dedicated to it every other week, we can do a bit more analysis on it by taking those things together and sticking them together. So that's what we're going to do. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into Congress, starting off with the Senate. So the Senate has returned from its summer recess on September 5th. Let's take a look at some of the news from this week. According to reporting from Reuters, Democratic leaders of the Senate returned to work seeking to gain the upper hand over House Republicans on the subject of funding the government. Before the break, a bipartisan group of senators collaborated on President Biden's request for a stopgap spending bill that would keep agencies funded before the full fiscal year that begins on October 1st. In a separate but related effort, Democrats and Republicans on the Senate Appropriations Committee backed the 12 separate spending bills that would finance most government operations for the entire fiscal year of 2024, which is from October of 2023 to October of 2024. The House Appropriations Committee produced bills with support only from Republicans, who control the House with a very narrow 4-vote margin. The Senate so far is sticking with the $1.59 trillion discretionary spending budget agreed to by Biden and House Republican Speaker Kevin McCarthy, which we reported on at the time during the government until at the time of the potential default of government debt. Unlike spending fights from the last several years, though, the Senate appears eager to promptly get the stopgap bill passed. This would then be presented as a united front to the splintered House Republicans in negotiations on the longer-term bills, which could extend into December. Top Senate Republican Mitch McConnell has voted for every one of the 12 fiscal 2024 bills advanced by the Senate Appropriations Committee, as have nearly all of his fellow committee Republicans. McConnell last week bemoaned the funding fight, saying, "Honestly, it's a pretty big mess. Speaking to a business..." I'm sorry. Let me go ahead and just let me redo that because I can do his voice pretty good. McConnell last week bemoaned the funding fight, saying, quote, "Honestly, it's a pretty big mess. Not going to be replicated in the Senate," he said, speaking to a business group in his home state of Kentucky. McConnell warned that the lower $1.47 trillion in spending for 2024. I see. I'm just going to restate that whole thing because I flubbed it up immensely, and I'm not going to do the voice anymore. So McConnell last week bemoaned the funding fight, saying, the quote, "Honestly, it's a pretty big mess." And speaking separately to a business group in his home state of Kentucky, McConnell warned that lowering from the $1.7 trillion in spending for 2024 is not going to be replicated in the Senate. In other news coming out of the Senate might be impeaching Biden, but not so fast. So Axios reported that top Senate Republicans are far from enthusiastic about the House GOP's potential move toward an impeachment inquiry into President Biden. Some senators say that the evidence is still too thin to merit such a drastic step. Others simply don't want to go through another trial after former President Trump's historic dual impeachments. Utah Republican Senator Mitt Romney told Axios, quote, "I don't know that there have been any high crimes or misdemeanors alleged. If there are, that would be a matter to consider. But until something like that is alleged, I don't know what the purpose of that inquiry might be." Even Alabama Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville said that he is, quote, "not for going through another damn trial, to be honest with you. We did that here with Trump." Tuberville said he is, quote, "all for the investigation, but doesn't think there is enough time to get impeachment trial done before the 2024 election." Adding, quote, I'll do it, but like I told them when they went after Trump, you better have an ironclad case. The Senate has habitually scoffed at the House's zeal for impeachment against Biden and his cabinet officials. Quote, impeachment ought to be rare, McConnell told the New York Times last month. This is not good for the country. Other senators brushed off questions about impeachment or suggested that other issues of policy should take priority in Congress already facing more than one looming crisis. Quote, I'm focused here on the Senate trying to get more appropriation bills done, said Senator Jerry Moran, a Republican of Kansas. And Senator Mike Rounds, Republican of South Dakota, added, quote, I think the real issue before us right now is avoiding a government shutdown. Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee Chair Gary Peters of Michigan said he thinks impeaching Biden will backfire on Republicans politically. Quote, there's nothing there, it's pure politics. People want us to focus on issues that they care about. End quote. Now, this is all pretty much true, right? There are things to look at when it comes to Hunter Biden and possibly some of the Biden children. The reason I say that is because it does look as though that Hunter Biden didn't pay his taxes. It does look as though that Hunter Biden was potentially going to get some sort of deal that some people might think is a sweet deal. It's not a sweet deal. It didn't happen. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't look into it. And I'm all for looking into it. Go ahead, investigate, see what you can find as far as whether or not Joe Biden himself was involved in these schemes or not. In my opinion, there is no evidence that he was involved in it. Did he know anything about his children's business deals? Maybe. Maybe he knew more than he let on when he was running for president and answered those questions. Or it could possibly be that he didn't know any specifics. He just knew that Hunter was gallivanting all across Europe in order to try to make money off of his name. That is something that pretty much every single political fail son or daughter does. And that is why a lot of political children and the rich and powerful children, i.e. Trump's family, are as rich as they are. It's not through their own merit, but through the merit or the possible connection of their parents' names. And we see this all the time. Rich people set up foundations and nonprofits and put their kids in charge as CEO or CFO or CTO, whatever the case may be, in order to pad their resume. We saw this with the Clinton Foundation when Chelsea Clinton was put in charge of a lot of what the Clinton Foundation did, at least on paper, right? And so this is something that everybody kind of does, but in order for it to be more than a little bit corrupt, in order for it to be illegal, it actually has to come and influence policy. And despite what anybody tells you about this, there's still no concrete evidence that it has actually impacted real policy. And go ahead, investigate it. And if we find there is, I will change my opinion on this. But as of right now, there does not appear to be any actual impact to policy or any change of what the government was going to do one way or the other in regards to Ukraine, China, etc. But that's the narrative that Republican operatives and media personalities are trying to push. That Biden, and it's not, there's no evidence for this, so it's a lie at this point, that Biden was influenced by his son to go after Shorkin in order to get his son's company off the hook for potential bribery or something. What we actually have here is that company was actually investigated. The former CEO of the company was actually investigated. They were investigated multiple times. They actually had a warrant out for their arrest. They came into the country. They were kind of cleared, left the country, was then again put back on an extradition list, and is currently being looked into right now. The entire all of Europe appears to have want Shorkin to be fired. And I think I know why. And this is supposition here, right? So this is not concrete evidence of what I'm about to say, so take it with a grain of salt. This is definitely just my opinion on this. But I think that the primary reason why why Europe and the United States wanted Shorkin fired had nothing to do with Burisma and everything to do with Russia and Russian connected oligarchs within Ukraine. Shorkin appeared to try to be threading a very hazardous political needle here of going after corruption, but not going after corruption too much that would actually put maybe his life in danger or give his friends and allies a reason to want him fired from the Russians and the Ukrainians. Eventually, he didn't thread that needle enough, and the Ukrainians Europe wanted him fired because he was going after either too many European-connected allies within Ukraine, or he simply was not going after Russian-connected ones hard enough. I lean towards him not going after Russian ones hard enough, specifically because of the fact that during the time that he was working, Russia was trying to get more influence in Ukraine via Russian-backed oligarchs or Russian-friendly oligarchs in Ukraine to steer Ukrainian policy towards a more Russian-friendly one, specifically with federating Ukraine and making it to where the Eastern Oblast region, Donetsk region, etc., would be administered by them separately from the government, kind of in this quasi-autonomous independent state. So think of it how the United States has states, right? So we have, Texas has its own rules and regulations, monitors a lot of what it does, but the federal government still is largely in charge of other things and can, rein them in. Whereas where Russia wanted the Eastern Ukraine to be almost an independent country, being able to make its own deals specifically with natural resources to give those to Russian companies and give the control to Russian companies. So if he wasn't going after the oligarchs that were trying to make that happen hard enough, Europe would have a problem. And that's where we are with that. As far as the impeachment is concerned, really what has to happen is that you cannot impeach a person in office, cannot remove them from office for something that they did prior to taking office. Where the constitutionality of that resides for a former office holder is up in the air. You could make a generalized legal case that you can't impeach President Biden for things that Vice President Biden did because he's no longer in that office. So this is on legal shaky ground in and of itself. As we've reported on the news roundup before, when we're talking about George Santos, you and I might want to see George Santos be removed from Congress by Congress because of all the lying he did to his constituents. However, according to the Supreme Court, you can't do that for things that happened outside of your time in office. There you go. And this might be why the Senate Republicans are like, I don't know, we can't really impeach him because there's not high crimes and misdemeanors here. Even if they believe that Biden lied about this stuff or that he was influenced by his son, they might not be wanting to go down this road because constitutionally it might not cut the mustard. So that's where we are with this. But with that concludes this segment of the news roundup. Now let's move on to the House. So the House will come roaring back into town on the 12th. Here's the latest news on what to expect right out the gate. Impeachment or the budget? A conundrum of House Republicans' own making. Per reporting from The Hill, House Republicans are set to face two major and politically polarizing issues when they return to Washington next week. As we've repeatedly reported on the Roundup, September was always poised to be a busy stretch on Capitol Hill. Most pressing should be the reality that lawmakers are staring down that end-of-the-month deadline to fund the government or risk a government shutdown. But this week, Speaker McCarthy announced the House could open an impeachment inquiry into President Biden as soon as this month, and that's kicked an already hectic outlook into overdrive. McCarthy and House Republicans will have 11 legislative days to keep the government's lights on and come to some sort of consensus on a potential impeachment inquiry. Both of these matters are a heavy lift for a conference that has little time and large disagreement on both matters. Logistically speaking, addressing both over the few legislative days in September will be tough. Doing so will require political maneuvering by McCarthy as he tries to balance extremist Republicans pushing for steeper spending cuts and moderates wary of opening an impeachment inquiry. The extremists, however, are making noise about a potential continuing resolution. For those that may not know, a continuing resolution is simply saying we will continue to fund the government at its current levels for X number of months. And basically it's saying whatever we are funding it, we're funding it again for, 3 months or 5 months, whatever the case may be. It can be up to a year, it could be 3 years, could suspend it, doesn't matter. That's what they could do. Let's continue on though. So the House Freedom Caucus, which is made up of roughly 36 members, put out an official position last month that said it will not support a stopgap funding bill unless it includes language to address the situation at the southern border, weaponization of the Department of Justice, which is not happening, and quote-unquote woke policies in the Pentagon. All right, so culture war. Yeah, all culture war bullshit. I mean, it's not bullshit. Culture is important. But come on, just fund the fucking government. Jesus Christ. But the Republicans, though, can only afford to lose 4 votes in the House, and united opposition from the MAGA side of the House could tank a stopgap bill unless some Democrats cross the aisle and support the measure, which has a large possibility of happening, just like we got over the debt ceiling fight. Whether Democrats will step in again to save the Republicans, as they did with the debt ceiling, will depend on the contents of that legislation, though. McCarthy has pledged to take the vote on impeachment inquiry to the full House. The move could potentially provide him with some political cover, though he may have to turn to the Democrats on this issue as well. According to the New York Post, Florida Republican Matt Gaetz said Tuesday, quote, "When we get back to Washington, we have got to seize the initiative. That means forcing votes on impeachment. And if Kevin McCarthy stands in our way, he may not have the job long. So let's hope that he works with us, not against us. But we've got contingency plans in the event that he's not as productive." There are more than 180 Republican members of the House who are not part of this wing of the Republican Party, and many are from states that Biden won in 2020 and Democrats won in 2022. Among them are Republicans that will face long odds in their 2024 races. Gaetz told conservative radio host Todd Starnes this week, quote, "I have traveled the country and spoken to so many Americans. They're disillusioned with House Republicans right now. They think that we have not put up a substantial battle to defeat the worst elements of this Biden administration." Now, on the impeachment front, this could be a way for McCarthy to actually get some concessions from the Freedom Caucus that is really looking to basically grandstand and put up a show of how they're taking it to the establishment and the DOJ and all this other stuff. If they go through with the impeachment inquiry, it goes to committee. The committee is chaired by some of these Republicans. They get to show their base what they're doing. They get to show their donors that they're doing something. And so that might curb down some of the spending woes. So it could be that either they pass all of they pass the continuing resolution in total with just Republicans, or it gives him enough political cover to be like, look, man, I gave you your impeachment inquiry. Democrats are going to give us our continuing resolution. Let's make this an issue in 2024. Let's not make the government funding an issue in 2024 for us, and it will look better for our team. That is probably the likely scenario here, depending on how the House Freedom Caucus wants to play it. In fact, I think that's probably the best play that McCarthy can make, so don't be surprised if he makes it. Now, for their part, though, are Republicans actually sticking to the plans they laid out, or are they just grandstanding, like we just said? So Republicans ran on 4 specific promises in the 2022 midterms. They took back control of the House, yes, but only by the slimmest of margins in a historic shellacking by the Democrats. The reason why this is called a historic shellacking by Democrats is that, generally speaking, the party out of presidential power does way better in the House than Republicans did. We're talking gaining 50 plus seats here, right? Republicans did not gain all that many seats. They took control, but they didn't take overwhelming control. They weren't up plus 60. They have no wiggle room. And that shows how Democrats were able to politically maneuver on issues such as Trump, abortion, what have you. And it really bet the Republicans in the ass. On that front, though, what legislation have they passed that addresses any of these promises? Let's check their report card. All right, so we're going over to that now. So this is their little, hey, we're doing stuff, let's go. So this is their commitment to America. Fight inflation and lower the cost of living. They'll do this by curbing wasteful government spending that is raising the prices of groceries, gas, cars, housing, and growing our national debt. The only one of those things on the list is partly true, and that is the growing of the national debt. Government's wasteful spending does not contribute much to inflation. Inflation is largely a either monetary or supply-driven phenomenon, coming out of a historic pandemic that shut down the economies across the globe. In a globalized economy is going to lead to inflation. Even if the government never gave anybody stimulus money whatsoever, it would still lead to this sort of inflation. So that is why we're having this here, especially with the supply chain being so messed up as it was. Just-in-time supply is largely dead, and that is how we are getting through this. That we built back up supplies, people have actually gone through and have not just in time, but supply plus 30 days or 60, 70 days or whatever. And that's why we're able to bring back down prices, decrease time to market, etc. Now, their second point was going to increase take-home pay, create good paying jobs, and bring stability to the economy through pro-growth tax and deregulatory policies. What is about that, though? So, increase take-home pay. Well, they're not going to increase the minimum wage, so that's off the table. That's the one thing that Congress can do directly. So they're not going to do that. So that's, to me, that's a failure. Create good paying jobs and bring back stability to the economy through pro-growth tax and deregulatory policies. Well, Biden's still a president, so they haven't really done much as far as deregulation. They haven't passed many of that things. They're not really creating good paying jobs. That was more Biden and Democrats through the Inflation Reduction Act, investing in green technology, which creates green jobs, which are high paying jobs, and as well as the infrastructure bill, which has knock-on effects throughout the entire economy, ensuring that people are able to increase home ownership and the like through better paying jobs. Biden has also been doing a good job when it comes to increasing union representation through his National Relations Board, and that National Relations Board has done a lot in terms of helping Amazon warehouse workers organize. And by helping, I mean actually ruling in favor of workers like they should, contrary to what people might think. That is what's supposed to happen, as well as a slew of other pro-union agenda items. Now, lefties and more progressive people than myself will rightly give Biden some crap, some shit for not, just shutting down the entire supply, well, not the entire supply chain, but a large chunk of the supply chain by not letting, I'm sorry. So lefties and liberals, progressives, people that are a little more left than myself will rightly give Biden shit because he did not allow the entire supply chain, or at least a large section of the supply chain, be jammed up by a rail worker strike. He stopped that. That was a good move from an economy's perspective and a political perspective. Because say what you want about what people want. Most regular day people want to see prices of goods go down, not go up, if the supply chain was brought to a halt. Shortly after the supply chain finally got cleaned up a bit through efforts that Biden did, as well as private companies through FedEx, UPS, and the military, all working in concert to bring goods to market. If that was hit a wall from a labor strike on the railways, that would have been bad news for the economy, and it would have led to increased prices, as well as less goods on people's shelves. So not only would you have had increased prices, you would have had a artificial shortage of goods and services. So that's why he did what he did. So even though he's pro-union, he was not pro this union this time on this particular thing, but he got some of the concessions out of the railway, the rail yards, and the rail companies to do that. So that is why he did that. So Republicans, in my opinion, failed on both of these things. So they didn't do that. Make America energy independent and reduce gas prices. So this is just about fracking. This is just about Keystone XL. They want to basically drill, baby drill everywhere, all the energy sources except green energy sources, because they get a lot of money from fossil fuel companies and that sort of thing. So that is why they're doing this. Energy prices will come down if we do other things other than drill for oil and gas. One of the greatest things that we could do right now, and this is going to piss off a lot of lefty and environmentalists, is build a couple of nuclear power plants out on the Western Plains and potentially in Texas. We got 2 or 3 nuclear power plants up and running. Our greenhouse emissions would drop significantly. It would create a ton of good paying jobs, and it would reduce the price of electricity substantially in some of these areas. Producing nuclear energy is extremely cheap. It is extremely cheap. It is also not that dirty. And the reason I say it's not that dirty is because we've come up with ways to store nuclear waste that do not require, that will prevent leakage and that sort of thing. I know you can't get rid of nuclear waste, but you're talking about after 100 years, less than I think it's like a container, like a shipping container of waste. After 100 years for a nuclear plant, it's less than that. The reason that it looks like it's so massive when you see the pile-ups of barrels and stuff is because it's spread out. It's spread out and it's contained in steel drums, so it looks like it's more than it is, but you can store that pretty safely on site. In fact, it's probably better to store it on site than ship it to a mountain or something else. 1, less likelihood of having an accident and having that spill somewhere else. 2, the site is already potentially a little more radioactive than the planet itself. And so you can just store it on site underneath the nuclear power plant. Drill a freaking 2-mile, 100-mile, whatever the hell it is, hole below the nuclear power plant, and basically just drop the reinforced steel containers down there and just stack it up, and it will serve as a containment for everything. So that's where that's at. So that is where Republicans are on that, and they still, honestly, they haven't really accomplished that. They've spent too much time focusing on culture war issues than actually trying to force Biden to drill, baby, drill. In fact, this is something that Democrats and Republicans probably could agree on and get something passed bipartisanly in order to open up, federal land to drilling and forest logging and whatever else. But they're not doing that because that might give Biden a fucking win. All right, so that's one other thing. Strengthen the supply chain and end dependence on China. Hey, Biden is doing that. Based Biden with the CHIPS Act, China is actually doing really badly right now in terms of its economic output. There are rumors out of China that there are millions of unemployed young people sitting in China. I think they're laying flat is what they're called. Let me look at that. I think it's called laying flat. Laying flat China. Yeah, I was right. Look at that. Geez, videos. This is different. China's new Tangping trend aims to highlight pressures of work. Yeah, so laying flat. So that's their version of quiet quitting. And then there's also China, massive job loss in the Xinjiang areas. Yeah, Xi'an layoffs, thousands of tech jobs cut as China CNN. That happened late last year. We got 2023 here. Record 11.6 million college graduates are seeking jobs this year. This was just 3 weeks ago. Let's go over to this. Let's see. We got that. China's economy's in trouble. Here's what's going on. All this coming out of this year. So this is stuff that's going on in China right now. And a lot of this is due to two things. One, Biden actually going after Chinese tech companies for stealing trade secrets and that and going after chip manufacturers to not give these computer chips to China, which is slowing down its ARB market, and China's zero COVID policy and Xi Jinping being a true believer in communism. So we did an episode on Cipher State. If you don't know what that is, look it up, called Xi Jinping and the Sting He Brings. I'm going to have to reprise that. We're going to have to do a part 3 on that. But regardless, basically everything that's going on in China right now is largely due to the desire of Xi Jinping to remove capitalism, capitalist power centers from the private market and put them in the hands of the government. And that is causing a ton of problems. And Biden is helping with that. So that's what we have here. So again, Republicans haven't done shit. All right. Biden is the one that's leading this effort. He's doing more than Trump did. Trump's trade war policy with China was done in such a stupid manner that China actually benefited from it. But this chip acts, these sanctions going after Huawei, etc., are doing damage to the Chinese economy. And that is, well, it's doing damage, not a lot, but combine that with Xi Jinping, and we're having a resurgence of American manufacturing and jobs, as well as a reconfiguration of the entire global supply chain caused partly by this and partly by COVID to get away from China. Its Belt and Road Initiative is going to matter a lot less if China isn't providing all the goods and services that it was expecting to along those routes. So that's where we're at with China. Again, Republicans haven't done anything. They have not passed a single bill on this. Well, I should say they have not gotten a single bill passed on this. The House might have passed a few bills in the House, but they died in the Senate. Okay. And a lot of the bills the House passed have nothing to do with these things. They're just platitudes. The real work is being done by the Senate and Biden, and that is a good thing. This segment's going to be a little long because I like to pontificate, people, okay? So sue me on it, all right? We're going to continue on. A nation that's safe because crime or something. This isn't to say that crime's not a problem. It is a problem. But where are they talking about it? The border. Got it. So fully fund effective border enforcement strategies, infrastructure, and advanced technology to prevent illegal crossings and trafficking by cartels. Okay. This is a thing that probably should be done. But the next part with catch and release loopholes, require legal status to get a job, and eliminate welfare incentives. All right, let's go through the list here. 1, illegal immigrants are not getting federal welfare. States with block grants can give undocumented workers welfare through various methods, should they choose to, but that is coming from a state position. Unless you want to get rid of block grants, which I don't think Republicans actually want to do, you're not going to stop the states from doing that. And even if you did stop block grants from doing this, the states might just choose to do this on their own with their own budgets. There's nothing to stop California from doing this on their own without federal assistance. There you go. Catch and release. Catch and release is not an actual thing. What they're talking about is the fact that due to various laws within immigration, there are the inability to detain a child permanently with their parent pending anything, right? So this is something Obama tried to do. He tried to keep families together within detention facilities, built entire facilities that, some people called cages, some people called, basically dorms, whatever it was bad news, but still he tried to do this. The courts said that he could no longer do it. And the reason the court said he could no longer do it is because of the Flores Amendment. For those that do not know, the Flores Amendment stated that a child, for the welfare of a child, due to human rights and international law and treaties the United States has signed and is part of the law within the United States, you cannot keep a child in custody for more than, I think it's 30 days. It's either 30 or 60 days. I think it's 30 days though. So actually, let's look that up really quick. Flores Agreement 97, 30 days. I think it's 30 days. Let me look at it real quick. 20 days. I was wrong on both counts. Can't keep a child in detention for more than 20 days. This is the Flores Agreement, not amendment. Flores Agreement. This was an agreement by the federal government and the courts to deal with migrant children. So that's what we have here. So what are you going to do? Well, you can do what Trump did, which is separate kids from their parents, right? And then keep the parents in detention. Or you can release people to sponsors, to actual state governments, to wherever else, and have them pending their asylum claims, pending their asylum trials, get work visas, etc., and contribute and be productive, yada, yada, yada. What Republicans want to do here is that they want to keep them in detention until their trial. And the reason that they want to do this is because they believe it will reduce immigration as a deterrent. But if you know anything about criminal justice, you know that deterrence doesn't fucking work. Why? Because most people don't think they're going to get caught. And when it comes to crimes such as crossing the border, most people are 100% correct. The likelihood of getting caught while crossing the border, either overstaying a visa, going across the border illegally, going through an illegal point of entry, whatever have you, most people are not going to get caught. Even with a border wall, most people will not get caught. Even with the Great Wall of Trump, most people are not going to get caught. Because you can climb it, you can run across it, you can cross the border legally and just fucking stay. So unless you're willing to do a whole unimaginable level of police state bullshit, checking every single person, checking every single cargo at the border, putting ankle monitors on people as soon as they come into the border so that you can go detain them if they overstay, all this stuff that is just abhorrent from a human rights perspective. Unless you're willing to do all this, you're not going to stop all of it from happening. You're not even going to fucking slow it down. Trump didn't slow it down. He didn't. This giant increase of detentions and this giant increase of turnarounds on the border due to Title 42, Remain in Mexico policy, expedited expulsion, etc., didn't slow it down. It just made it cost more money. And that is borne out by the facts. So this whole idea of catch and release loophole is not a fucking loophole. It is a necessity of the system that we have. Because only Congress can fix this. Congress can fund the courts. It can pass laws that make it to where asylum seekers can't cross in illegal points of entry. It can pass laws that dictate that an asylum seeker has to go through a third country. It can get out of treaties that require all asylum claims to be heard before being kicked out. It can increase the number of judges to actually hear these cases in a timely manner. All these things need to come from Congress. The president literally cannot fix these things. It is impossible for the president to fix these things. They don't have the power and they don't have the ability to. This is on Congress. So if you want Congress to fix, if you want this to be fixed, you have to go through Congress. Full stop. And Congress isn't wanting to fix this. Republicans, for their end, only want a fucking border wall. That's not going to fix this. We want security first. Security is not going to fix this. All you're going to do is massively increase cost. People like Chip Roy want us to just detain people until they are able to have their cases heard inside the United States, inside our legal system. That just means massive detention centers being built, literal concentration camps. Okay? It meets the definition of a concentration camp. If you don't want to use that loaded language, it is a giant fucking prison that you're just going to keep people in for crossing the border illegally. You want to pay for that? You want the American government to pay to detain people for crossing a border? Really? You'd rather do that than fix the issue to make it to where they can cross the border legally and work here, contribute, maybe become citizens at some point? That's what you want. You want to pay for punishment, not actual solutions. If that's what you want to do, more power to you, I guess. But that's what we're doing here. That's what's happening, okay? So that is why the border is such an issue. Yes, the cartels need to be dealt with. That's going to require military intervention by their governments. A strong military response by their governments. And they are weak states. They're weak states. So unless you want to go to war, unless you want the United States to go to war, most anti-war party, Republican Party ever, that is on them to fix. And on us to not export them back to their countries. Or not export gangs to these countries. The whole reason the MS-13 exists is because of Americans deported people that created gangs in the United States, going to gang culture, and that made them big names back home in Venezuela. Or in wherever MS-13. God damn it. Country. I think El Salvador? Yeah, I know it's created in Los Angeles. Where the fuck? Salvador. Yeah, El Salvador. Okay. I knew it was created in California, right? It was created in the United States, like most gangs. I didn't remember it was El Salvador. So that's what we have, guys. That's what we have for immigration. You know, you want to require legal status to get it up. More power to you. Asylum seekers have a legal status. Let's speed up that process. That's one of the things that New York is asking for right now. In fact, let's do that really quick. New York ask for expedited work visas. We're saying we must expedite work visas. It's just common sense. Thousands of jobs are available to be filled to provide the services we need in the city. This country added some 100,000 migrants have arrived in the city since last spring, according to the mayor. And right now, work visa wait time, I think it is 90 days. Wait time, US ASYLYM. Oh, shit. Currently taking US Custom and Immigration Services 5.5 to 14 months to process work visa applications. Again, this is something that needs to be fixed by Congress. The money needs to be dedicated to this to get rid of the backlog and so people can start working. The whole reason why there's a migrant crisis, and I'm going to pull it back to me for this one real quick. The whole reason there's a migrant crisis happening within democratic cities is because two things. One, they are being bused there deliberately in droves by Republican governors. Honestly, more power to them. They made a masterful political play. It's fucking evil, okay? It makes issues worse than what would happen if people just left and went their own ways to wherever they could find work with their families or whatever, right? So it's fucked. But it is a good political move. That's one issue. The second issue is because they legally can't work. So if it's going to take 5 months to get a work visa and it's illegal to hire a person without one, then they're not getting jobs. And therefore, they're just sitting there, not able to do anything. So that's increasing homelessness and increasing strain on services that cities provide in order to help tackle homeless, jobless, and other stuff. Because these cities do want to help people get a job, find housing, etc. Getting healthcare, what have you. Because they are cities with a little bit of compassion. Okay? It's not being done because they're illegal immigrants and we just want to help illegal immigrants. No, it's being done because they're people. And the people in these cities get those resources as well. All right? So what would you rather have? A bunch of people living on the street and therefore potentially increasing crime? Or would you want them in a homeless shelter, in an office building that's not being used, in your home, potentially? What would you rather have? Third option, I want magic option number 3. I want them to be able to get a job legally and start working. Because that's what they're here for anyways. But no, Republicans just want a fucking border wall so we can't get these actual solutions passed. Because they like to have the political cudgel against Democrats. Meanwhile, real people are suffering. Real everyday Americans are suffering, and Republicans are just smiling. They're smiling. Just full on shit-eating grin. Because they know it's going to help them politically. And they're right about that. That's why I'm passionate about this stuff. That's why I do this newscast. Because people need to know what's actually going on. So that is another thing. Let's go back over to it, though. Reduce crime. All right. Support 200,000 more police officers through recruiting bonuses and oppose all efforts to defund the police. You know what? I'll let that one slide. That's fine. They haven't done anything with that. That's not necessarily a fully bad plan. Again, I'm not a raging leftist here, okay? I don't know if recruiting bonuses will actually help. I think what we actually need in this country is to actually just pay people more, just in general, for all civil services. Like, the amount of time that a patrol officer, especially just getting started, spends on the streets is far too much, which increases chances of fucking up. You know, if you're working an 18-hour shift as a police officer, you're going to get tired. Tired people make mistakes. Except when it comes to police, tiredness can lead to death. Okay? So maybe we should do that. Maybe we should make it illegal to moonlight and just pay them more. That might be a good idea. But yeah, so I'm going to let that one slide. I'm not anti or pro defund the police. I think we probably need to do both. And that means targetedly defunding certain aspects of the policing, giving those resources to other departments that actually tackle causes of crime and are generally better for people. But at the same time, we do probably need more police officers, so less people are working overtime, and there's no moonlighting and stuff like that. Like, that's going to require more money. So overall, there should probably be more money spent, but there should be certain things that money shouldn't get spent on, and that money that is being spent on that should be reallocated to things that are better. That's where I'm at with that. Again, though, Republicans haven't done shit about this. To be fair, they're not going to be able to get this through the Senate, but they could if they bother to try to make actual deals. Because regardless of what people want to tell you, Democrats are anti-police. Shocker. I know. Oh, you think Democrats hate the police? You think upper middle class white people hate the police? You think property owning people hate the police? You think poor people that make up the Democratic base, part of the Democratic base, don't like the police helping fight crime in their communities? Come on, dude. You're talking about some activist that might hate the police, but it's not really that many people. It's not. So maybe, just maybe, you can actually work across the aisle with Democrats, some more of the conservative ones. Hell, Joe Biden was called what? Joe Biden is the creator of the fucking crime bill. Maybe you could work with him to actually get some of these things done. I mean, after all, Joe Biden said this fucking thing, man. He said, fund the police, Biden quote. I'm going to put, this one will get, yeah, see? State of the Union. State of the fucking Union.
Investigating crime prevention and community policing. Cops who walk the beat, who know the neighborhood, and who can restore trust and safety. Let's not abandon our streets or choose between safety and equal justice. Let's come together and protect our communities, restore trust, and hold law enforcement accountable. That's why the Justice Department has required body...
See how I can't with these people, man. I'll get this clipped into the segment that I'm going to cut for this, because I'm going to cut a segment from this. This is too good to let it go. But seriously, you think that you can't get that done? You're just not trying. You're not. Crack down on prosecutors and district attorneys who refuse to prosecute crimes while permanently criminalizing all forms of illicit fentanyl. Okay, fentanyl is illegal. It's a controlled substance. Unless you're prescribed it, you can't take it. So this is really a state issue here. All this is state issues. The federal government can't really do much than that. Sorry. Defend America's national security. Support our troops. Invest in efficient, effective military. Establish a select community on China. And exercise peace through strength with our allies to counter increasing global threats. Biden is doing all this. And in the meantime, people like Tuberville stops appointment of officers. Why a single senator is blocking U.S. military promotions and what it means for the Pentagon. This fucker here, all over abortion nonsense, is actually making our country less safe. So, going back over to the scorecard, big giant fucking F on this one. Giant, huge F. Huge. Immense. Just failure. Just on that alone. Congratulations, Republicans. You fucking played yourself. Eat my whole ass. Look, more culture stuff. Make sure every student can succeed and give parents a voice. Advance the Parents' Rights Bill of Rights, recover lost learning from school closures, and expand parental choice so over 1 million more students can receive the education their parents knows is best. So, what are they talking about here? Defend fairness by ensuring that only women can compete in women's sports. All right, so 2 huge cultural issues here. So what are they talking about with this one? Well, expand parental choice so over 1 million more students can do what their parents think is best. This is about vouchers. This is about destroying public education. This is about getting more people into parochial religious schools. This is all culture stuff right here. Now, I am not anti-voucher as a concept. The reason I'm not an anti-voucher as a concept is because the concept actually works in more countries that use it when they do it correctly. But that is a big thing. When they do it correctly. none of the Republicans that are pushing forward voucher bills across the United States are doing it correctly. Okay? Make no mistake, they don't give a shit. Okay? What they want is for middle class and upper middle class welfare to destroy public teachers unions and public schools because they don't think they should be funded at all. They don't want the state involved for a couple of reasons. One of the bigger reasons is because you can't teach religion in school. And if the government isn't in charge of the school, then they can't be told they can't pray and lead prayer and force the pledge of allegiance and yada, 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 right? Because that's how our law is currently set up. Private schools can require all that because they're private, but government schools can't. And that's one of the reasons why they want people to go to private schools. It's mostly culture, okay? Another reason is because this will make a ton of people a lot of money. Because if the government still funds it, but doesn't control it or oversight, then a lot of people can come in, government money, get me rich, bitch. Just draining it in. Siphoning the public coffers for private gain. That's another reason. And I hope some Republicans are watching this right now. I hope some conservatives are, because this is what's going on. So that's partly what they're talking about here. Now, the Advanced Parents Bill of Rights and Recover Lost Learning from School Closures, this is going to be give and take. Okay? There are parents' rights that do exist. There are children's rights that exist. And there is a balancing act here. Okay? That's why communities largely determine what is taught in school. That is why parents can opt out or have to opt in to certain education. We have that kind of system in the United States, and maybe we don't want the government having complete control over it. Maybe we don't want a teacher to have complete control over it, right? There's some give and take here. That aspect of this is not something that people, especially on the left, should take a huge amount of issue with. You can take issue with it. Children have rights. They're not their parents' property. They have the right to learn information. Their parent can't keep that information from them forever. Okay? We live in a society. Society helps nurture everything. All right? There's give and take. There is give and take. And this is so obvious to people when you take it away from things that are like, oh, maybe we shouldn't teach kids that. If you go to a thing that's logical for people, they obviously know that this is correct. So we can start there. Parents lose the rights of their kids when they're abusive, emotionally or physically abusive. Neglect. Parents lose their rights when they neglect their kids. Okay? We already have things in place to protect the rights of children. And children have rights. Parents have responsibilities more than they have rights over their child. It's a responsibility. Okay? And that is just the way it is. It's the way it's been forever. Throughout a millennia. I mean, way back in the day, somebody else could watch you on the fucking street and be like, hey, kid, you're being a little shit. Snatch you up. And people were cool with that. Not cool with it anymore. Reasons being, some of them make sense. All right? But I'm just saying, I'm putting this in context that this is not this like hyper, oh, my child is only my responsibility, my rights over my child does what I say, they learn what I want to learn, blah, 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 blah. Like, all those things are fairly new in society. Fairly new. Probably has something to do with the fact that people are having a lot less kids. So if you're only having one child, but if you're having 8, you know, but kids have rights. And that is what we have to acknowledge here. Kids have rights. Parents and adults have responsibilities. They also have rights to an extent, there is a balancing act. And recovering learning from school closures. Again, this is something that should happen, but they're not doing anything to make it happen. They're not focusing on this. They're focusing on Biden, border, and leaving all this to the wayside. So there you go. And then this one is just being basically like, let's redefine Title IX so that trans women, and that's the only thing they care about, not competing in women's sports. You know? And, you know, there's a little bit of give and take there as well. But to me personally, if it's before high school, who gives a shit? Why do you care? This idea is like, oh, you're going to shower together. What are you talking about? Seriously, before high school, who gives a shit? Let people compete. Like, the point of sports isn't just elite competition. It's also camaraderie, sportsmanship, leadership training, group exercises, etc., right? Just like kids play sports, man. It's not that big of a deal. It's not going to take away opportunities from other people. Just let it happen. That's where I'm at with it. But we can say there's give and take. On this one, there are differences physically between cis men and cis women. The question is how much of those matter when you're a child or when you're a child on hormone replacement therapy. So there's give and take. There's give and take. All right, we're almost done here, so we're going to plow through these. Personalized care to provide affordable options and better quality delivered by trusted doctors. That doesn't mean anything. Lower prices through transparency, choice, competition, invest in life-saving cures, and improve. This is platitudes. This whole choice and competition is basically trying to get rid of some of the minimum stuff required under Obamacare. We invest in life-saving cures all the time. That's one of the reasons why the United States leads in medical advancements. So again, this is just a platitude. It's already being done, but they have not worked on any of this whatsoever or have gotten any of it done. Confront big tech and demand fairness. They're doing some of this. They're doing some of this with their hearings. Don't be surprised that there's some laws passed out of that. Even a lot of left-leaning people are concerned with tech censorship and tech oversight of the entire economy and political sphere stuff. But again, if we're going to care about this, we shouldn't let one company be in charge of so much stuff. Maybe we should have an Internet Bill of Rights, something that Republicans didn't like when we talked about the fairness doctrine and as well as net neutrality. So there's that problem there. Let's see. Preserve constitutional, uphold freedom of speech, protect the lives of unborn children. Again, platitudes. There's nothing they can do here. Supreme Court got rid of Roe, so I guess victory for them. They legally can't pass a constitutional carry amendment that it impacts the entire country because states still control their borders. So that's not going to work. Hold Washington accountable, conduct rigorous oversights to rein in government abuse of power, corruption, and provide real transparency. Require the White House to answer for its incompetence at home and abroad. Again, this here is just partisanship. This here is talking about their hearings on weaponizing of the government, the judiciary, etc. So I guess they're doing this to a degree. So I guess that is something they're actually doing. They're not doing this. When they say save and strengthen Social Security, they mean cut Social Security and Medicare. They mean make it solvent by reducing benefits. So they want to take away benefits from you. So, and they're not going to get that done. That's why Biden said some of y'all want to gut Medicare and Social Security, because it's true. Let's see. And restore the people's voice and special treatment for members of Congress by repealing proxy voting and increase accountability in the election process through voter ID, accurate voter rolls, and observer access. So this is, again, all the claims, lies, they've spread about the 2020 election. Proxy voting does not actually do anything bad with the ability to doesn't treat members of Congress as special. Proxy voting is actually how you can ensure that your district has a voice if a congressional member is not there. So that's just nonsense. And that's not something that's going to get passed because, face it, Congress is old as fuck, and sometimes they're going to have to be in surgery during votes. But they're kind of wanting this. They're kind of wanting this because of the fact that if there's not somebody there, they can win votes with fewer people. So that's one of the reasons there. As less people show up, the majority for a bill passage decreases. So that's partly also why they want there. They want to have special rights for their districts and not have your district, if your congressman is not there for whatever reason, to have a voice. So fuck off. Increase accountability in the election process through voter ID, accurate voter rolls, and observer access. As I already told you, this is mostly about lies about the 2020 election. That's what they're talking about here. Now, this just shouldn't be a thing. There should not be a thing as voter registration. I've talked about this on this program extensively, and I know I've been going for a very long time on this segment here. But voter registration should just be automatic. There shouldn't be any need for a person to register to vote. The vast majority of states have income taxes. Okay? A state that has income tax knows where you work and knows where you live. They just do. So they can just look on that and be like, this person lives here. There you go. Boom. Done. Like as soon as they start collecting taxes from you, they should register you to vote. As soon as you turn 18 in a state, they should register you to vote. As soon as you get your driver's license or any ID, you should be in the system to register to vote. So when you turn 18, you are registered to vote. There should be no updating whatsoever. The only update that should have to happen from an individual is if they move from one district in a state to another district in the state, and that's just to ensure that you're voting in the right district. That's it. Everything else should be automatic. And even with that, that can be done through records automatically that the state has. For example, if you own a home, your address is known by the state because you are required to pay taxes on that property. So the state knows where you live. The state could easily require that the person that owns a rental property also associates that with the person that they're renting it out to. And then that information could easily be used to register people to vote. This isn't hard, but they're just not doing it. Now, if they did all that, there would be no longer this problem. Accurate voter rolls would be a thing of the past because they would be accurate a hell of a lot more than they are right now. When a person dies, the state knows they died. Their death certificate's registered with the state. Their death certificate and social security number is registered with the state. That should automatically remove them from the voter rolls. But they're not doing this because this issue is something they can bring up again and again. And sometimes they just want to make voting harder. Because if you don't work for it, do you really deserve to vote? It's nonsense. Now, with all that said, you know what? Honestly, voter ID, if you're going to require an ID to vote, fine. Just give it to people for free. It's that simple. That removes my complaint from voter ID completely. So, Republicans, there you go. That's my olive branch to you. Do what I think Georgia did this. Did Georgia? I think Georgia did it. I'm pretty sure it was Georgia that gives people IDs for free. If you prove who you say you are, you get a fucking ID for free. It's that simple. Just do that. I will no longer have complaints about voter ID. There you go. Most liberals will stop saying, oh, okay. They'll stop complaining about it because then there isn't a artificial barrier to voting. Because if you're poor and you can't afford an ID, or you can't afford the documents required to get that ID, updated birth certificate, a replacement of your social security card, whatever else the state might require you to prove that you are who you say you are. If you can't afford those things because you're broke, you should still be able to vote. Easy done. Easy peasy. There you go. So yeah, with all that said, it should be obvious to everybody that what the Republicans do, what they have been doing in Congress, has been focused primarily on electioneering and not actually doing the things that they said they were going to do. Absent, what's this phrase again? Absent grandstanding on the border, absent grandstanding on cultural issues, they haven't done shit. Remember that when you go to the polls. But with that, my friends, that does conclude this segment of the News Roundup. Ooh, that was fun. Man, that was like an hour. That's a good segment. I'm going to cut that up and have that published tomorrow. But if you're just joining us, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. You're a lovely audience. Please smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. We do this every Thursday, unless stated otherwise, from roughly 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the news that was of the last week, the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. So that's what we do here. We also are in desperate need, though. We are in desperate need of getting a video editor. We need a video editor. Please, I'm begging you, help me make this show better by helping me edit these clips. You will be paid for your work. I can negotiate with you on how much you want to be paid, either hourly, per video, how long the segment is, whatever it is. We can negotiate that. But I'm willing to pay decent money. I don't know if it's serious money, but from what I've gathered, industry standard is anywhere between $30 and $60 an hour. And so I'm willing to pay you in that range for video editing. But let's talk about that offline. So if you or somebody you know has the ability and wants to make some extra money and can edit these kind of videos in a way that I enjoy, then please reach out to me and let's make something happen. All right? But let's continue on, though. We got to continue on with the news sound roundup. And now we're going to turn over to some SCOTUS news. So the Supreme Court of the United States returns the first Monday of October. TikTok SCOTUS blog reported this week on 3 new cases placed on the calendar for the coming term. We'll go over to their summary of this, and then I will pontificate as needed. So it's only about 30 seconds, so let's go ahead and let her talk.
The Supreme Court has set a date for one of the biggest cases of the term over the Second Amendment. The justices will hear oral argument in United States v. Rahimi on November 7th. Now, I've done a whole TikTok on this case, but it's a challenge to the federal ban on the possession of guns by individuals with a domestic violence restraining order. In the same sitting on the same calendar, they're all...
Okay. So the Laufenberg Amendment basically makes it illegal to purchase or possess a firearm if you have a domestic violence verdict against you. The reason for this is because it was shown statistically that people who have engaged in domestic violence are more likely to commit and then also murder their partners should they get a gun. So they're more likely to use it in a threatening way, use it to have power over them, etc. And so that is why this was included during the 1992 assault weapons ban and why it was actually kept despite the assault weapon ban being sunsetted. 92, 96, I don't know. The year escapes me. It was in the 90s. So that's what they're talking about. And this is being challenged because this person believes they should have the right to have a gun, despite the fact that they were involved in a domestic violence case. And I don't know. I'm one to restore people's rights once they have been punished and redeemed themselves. So maybe.
They're also going to hear a pair of cases about public officials blocking constituents on social media. That one's set for Halloween.
Oh, that's fun. So let's talk about the blocking members on social media. This is something that we all have to deal with, okay? If you are a public figure, bigger than me, you know what it's like to get harassed. Because that's just what people on the internet do, okay? They like to harass. And the easiest way to stop harassment or a harassment campaign is just to mass block everybody that is engaged in it and lock down your account. But if you're a public official, is that account, even if it's a private account, even if your personal individual account, is that something you should be allowed to do? Because people are allowed to petition the government for redress and talk to politicians for redress of grievances. This is a fundamental right in the United States, and generally speaking in the broader liberal world in general. So there's maybe some give and take here, okay? If you're using that account to conduct official business, should you be able to block somebody? Or should you not be able to? This is a issue with a First Amendment that does not take into account scale. And so we might see some rules established by the Supreme Court about this, because pretty sure the Supreme Court justices have been threatened online. Pretty sure they've had to deal with trolls and general shitty people and probably blocked some people, or maybe they just don't have social media accounts at all. That's another way to go about this. Just don't have a social media account. But for a politician, that's not really that possible. You need to engage with people where they are, and most people are online. So maybe we'll have some things with the First Amendment being shooken up here. Maybe harassment won't be tolerated anymore. Maybe you can't threaten a sitting member of Congress with violence. That's one way to go about this. And if you do, they are allowed to block you. So that's kind of what we're seeing. What is possibly going to happen. I expect there to be some sort of rule that tries to thread this needle a little bit. And that's important. I feel like that's important. I feel like the other possible way to thread this needle is that official business can only be conducted on your government account, and that any other thing that you do on your private account is you can block it away. So for example, the government creates congressional seat 35, and that just goes to the next person, that owns that is in that congressional seat. And that is where all official business needs to be conducted from. So announcements about bills, what you're trying to get passed, that sort of thing, right? And that account you can't block people on. But your private account, the one you use to campaign on, the one you use to just talk generally about different things, whether it's like, oh, I just got this great cheese bread over here, or these wings were really good at such and such place, and I had a great time meeting constituents at so and so, like, or that sort of thing. Maybe that's where the blocking can happen. I don't know. Again, there's some give and take here, but that's where we're at with that part of the Supreme Court cases. Now, speaking though of Supreme Court cases, and we'll shove these two together here, is that we also have some additional news coming out of the Supreme Court, specifically with Justice Clarence Thomas's financial disclosure and some new revelations. So we talked about this pretty extensively. Video can see above here once it comes up on the clips. But Clarence Thomas and some of the other justices have been a little not forthright, a little bit of sussy when it comes to taking gifts from mega donors for Republican Party and other people that might have business before the Supreme Court. So let's get into it there. Now, according to reporting from USA Today, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has disclosed additional travel paid for by GOP megadonor Harlan Crow just last year. In an extensive note attached to an annual disclosure report made public last Thursday, Thomas reported a flight paid for by Crow last year for an American Enterprise Institute event in Dallas, where the justice was the keynote speaker. For people that may not know, the American Enterprise Institute is a conservative economical think tank that reports on various different economic and sociological things and does studies and stuff like that. That's what they do. Just so you're aware. Now, Thomas said that he accepted the private flight because of the increased security risk after the leak in May of a draft of the High Court's opinion overturning Roe v. Wade. As we've pontificated on this program before, I believe that the person that leaked Roe v. Wade's memo was actually Justice Alito, or not Alito. I'm sorry. Was it Alito? Yeah, no, Justice Alito. Okay. For some reason, I was thinking I had the right name, but the wrong image in my head of the justice. So I'm like, wait, that's not the guy. But yes, as I've reported, though, like I said, my opinion is that Alito actually leaked the memo. The memo leak came from inside the house in order to try to pressure Roberts into not fighting for a 15-week ban as much as he would otherwise. And make it to where, like, well, we already released this. We can't go back on our word now. What will our friends say? Sort of thing. That's what I think happened. Because there's no incentive for the Democrats to release said memo. There really isn't much of one there. It would have been better for it to just hit all at once, and so people were really taken aback by it, rather than being like somewhat defeated when it happened. You're like, well, we already knew this was going to happen. It would have been, I think, more energizing when the rule came out, if it came out just without any foreshadowing. So, yeah, I think that's why it was leaked. I think there was rumblings in the internal court for it, and this was actually a political pressure campaign to be put on to the other justices so they wouldn't break ranks on it. That's my opinion. But anyways, moving on. The annual disclosure report, which typically provides only limited details about justices' outside income and investments, also noted a private plane trip paid for by Crow to Texas in February of 2022. Excuse me. That trip, Thomas said, was due to an unexpected ice storm. Sure, buddy. Right. I believe you. The disclosure notes another trip paid for by Crow to Crow's Lodge in the Adirondacks. Adirondacks. There he goes. And for the first time, acknowledged Crow's purchase of property from Thomas in 2014. Now, this property talking about here is the fact that his mother is currently in his childhood home. Crow purchased the home from Thomas above market value, also allowed her to live there rent free, and did fixes to the property to set it up as some sort of museum after Thomas dies. Basically, I'll guarantee your legacy, little boy. Thank you. Thank you for ruling in favor of me. You're so great. Thank you. Oh my God. Yes. That sort of stuff. So that's where we're at there. Now, an attorney for Thomas, though, fired back at critics who have questioned his ethics in a lengthy statement describing the criticism of the senior associate justice as political blood sport. Nah, dude. No, this isn't political blood sport. You fucked up. If a member of Congress did what you did, they would be voted out of office, more than likely, and they would be held up on ethics charges within Congress and censured. You know, assuming they weren't in the party in charge, maybe. But that's what would happen. That would be what would be pushed for. Supreme Court can just sit back easy, kick their feet up, light up a nice cigar, and relax. Because they don't have to worry about nothing. Continuing on, though, the justice is seeking guidance on whether he will amend reports from prior years, according to the latest document. In other words, should I tell him more stuff? Will I get away with it if I don't? That sort of thing. In this disclosure, the justice acknowledged that Crow purchased a home in Georgia in 2014, in which, as we just said, the justice's mother lives, as well as 2 other properties. Thomas said that Crow paid $133,000 and that he inadvertently failed to realize he should have reported the sale because he said he took a loss on the transaction. God, come the fuck on. Are we supposed to believe this bullshit? This home is paid for and being repaired. Your mother lives there rent free. You don't have to pay taxes on it because you don't own the property anymore. And then when you die, it's going to be turned into a museum in your name. And it's already all stipulated about the property. There's already a trust established for it. Give me a fucking break. Come on. If it's one thing that people really care about when they get to this level of power, it's cementing their legacy so they can have an impact way down in the future, hundreds of years from now, as some sort of, I am a very important person and you should respect me even though I've been dead for 200 years. I will not be forgotten. It is that sort of stuff. That's what they're doing here. That's why this that's why this property rather, is so important, and why this is such a brazen violation of ethics. That unless you are the most extreme partisan person, you should be able to see this. It should be obvious that that's what's going on here. And it should be obvious that this is, of course, going to affect your feelings about what it is and is not appropriate to rule for or against Crow. Because your legacy is at stake. It's being helped by this person. Why wouldn't you do them a solid? It's the same reason why we think campaign finance reform needs to be done. Because if you're getting millions of dollars from one person, why wouldn't you listen to them more? It's the same sort of thing, even though the amount of money is smaller, the amount of prestige is way bigger. Way bigger. And that's what people in these positions of power care about. It's all about legacy after a certain point. Thomas is rich as fuck. Legacy lives forever when you have a fucking museum that can stand the test of time. So please don't insult our intelligence by saying, oh, no, I didn't have to claim this. I took a loss. Fuck off. But let's wrap this up. Thomas also disclosed a life insurance policy held by his wife, Ginny Thomas, and bank accounts he said were omitted from prior annual reports. It depends on what's in those bank accounts, but I can understand that a little bit. But the other stuff, no, you know what? I'm not going to give you the benefit of doubt on this because you fucked up so much. So scratch what I just said. Eat shit. In a statement attached to his report, Thomas laid out his case for why some of the earlier travel paid by Crow was not disclosed. It says the flights and lodging, he said, were exempted from disclosure requirements until federal judiciary officials released new guidelines earlier this year. Going forward, the statement read, Going forward, the statement said, filer will report any such trips. Okay. So I'm going to do some stuff here. So let's go ahead and just do that. Now, Justice Thomas isn't the only one in the ethics hot seat here. We also have, of course, Samuel Alito. 2 peas in a pod going down the lane of unethical conduct. So according to Courthouse News and Roll Call, Justice Samuel Alito filed a report that was also made public on Thursday. Alito disclosed that Notre Dame Law School paid for a trip to Italy last summer, where he used an address in Rome to push back on critics of the Supreme Court's decision to end constitutional right to abortion. This past Thursday, Rhode Island Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse lodged a formal complaint against Alito. This comes just weeks after the Wall Street Journal published an op-ed that quoted Justice Alito as criticizing Whitehouse's proposed legislation that would require a code of ethics for the High Court. Essentially, what? No, I'm a justice of the Supreme Court. You can't tell me what to do. Constitution says otherwise, bucko, and you know that too. Co-equal branches of government? Nah. The legislature is more equal among them. Now this report comes just weeks after the Wall Street Journal published an op-ed. Oh, I'm sorry. The op-ed was published amid a swirling reports that he had neglected to disclose a 2008 fishing trip with a Republican billionaire, a billionaire who later had business before the court. I've got friends in high places where the whiskey is expensive and money traces my troubles away. I don't know how to make the song hoity-toity. You get the point, okay? For his part, Whitehouse has demanded that Justice John Roberts investigate Alito's comments, arguing that they represent yet another breach of Supreme Court ethics. Quote, in the worst case, facts may reveal that Justice Alito was involved in an organized campaign to block congressional action with regard to a matter in which he had a personal stake, Whitehouse told Roberts in a letter on Thursday. Continuing on, he stated, quote, whether Justice Alito was unwittingly used to provide fodder for such interference or intentionally participated is a question whose answer requires additional facts. Again, ethics rules don't necessarily mean you were corrupt. It means that you have given the air of a corruption, and that in of itself is a detriment to good order, discipline, rule of law, trust in society, etc. Something we are very much having an issue with, not just in the United States, really across the entire world right now, but especially in the United States, because that infects you and me. It's a massive lack of trust. And it's one of those things that the government has to build back in itself. And ethics rules around the Supreme Court is one of those ways to do it. Or one of the parts, I should say, of doing that. Now, the July op-ed featuring Alito's interview was written by James Partnow, the journal's editorial features editor. Sharing the byline, however, was Washington-based lawyer David B. Rifkin, Jr., who is slated to argue a major tax case before the Supreme Court in its upcoming term. Why are you telling on yourselves? You could have just not said anything. You could have just shut up. But you chose to tell on yourself, making it obvious that you know that these kinds of things influence justices' decisions on the Supreme Court. Or just in general, any judge. It just so happens that the Supreme Court isn't bound by an ethics statute or a code of conduct like the other lower courts are. This would be a huge scandal if it happened in a state. Never mind the Supreme Court itself. Don't insult our intelligence by trying to claim, oh, I'm just a good guy. I'm just trying to help out. I'm just trying to help out. You're telling yourself, you know that this influences the court. You know it does. Continuing on, though, Rifkin is also working as counsel for conservative activist Leonard Leo. For those that may not know, Leonard Leo, I'm pretty sure, let me double check this. But Leonard Leo, yeah, Leonard Leo is the guy that's in charge of the Heritage Action Committee for specifically the Federalist Society, rather, not the Heritage Action. Well, no, is he doing that too? I think he's doing both. Hold on. Yeah. Anyways, so Leonard Leo. Don't quote me on the Heritage Action thing here, but he definitely was part of the Federalist Society in charge of basically picking Supreme Court justices during Trump's term. So again, people that are going to have business in the Supreme Court who want extreme amount of influence over the country through the court system are also doing this shit. Leo organized Alito's 2008 fishing trip and is an outspoken critic of White House's legislation. Because of course he is. Because it might make him get in trouble. Rightfully so. In the interview, Alito suggested that efforts to police the Supreme Court's ethical conduct would be unconstitutional. Quote, Congress did not create the Supreme Court, the jurist said. No provision in the Constitution gives them authority to regulate the Supreme Court, period. This is just an outright lie. So let's look at this. So I don't remember what Federalist paper it was, but Federalist Papers did explain that the Congress is the more equal branch of government, that most of the power resides in Congress, and Congress is set to be a check both on the Supreme Court and the executive and vice versa. They all supposed to like check each other in various different ways, but the legislative branch is supreme. Okay. Now with that though, the legislature can also, what is it called? Legislative branch can remove judicial oversight. Yeah. Jurisdiction stripping. That's what it's known as. Okay. So what we're talking about here is that in the United States, in the Constitution, Congress has the ability to strip jurisdiction away from any court to have oversight. The existence of this ability, as written in the Constitution, is one way that Congress is made higher than other branches of government. Okay. This is reading it off just from the Wikipedia page really quick. The court creating power is granted both in the Congressional Powers Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Chapter 9, and in the Judicial Vesting Clause, Article 3, Section 1. Second, Congress has the power to make exceptions to and regulations of appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. The court limiting power is granted in the Exceptions Clause, Article 3, Section 2, by taken together by exercising these powers in concert, Congress may effectively eliminate any judicial review of certain federal legislative or executive actions and of certain state actions, or alternatively transfer the judicial review responsibility to state courts by knocking federal courts out of the game. Again, Alito is being full of shit here. He just doesn't want to have oversight done on him because the Supreme Court, some people in the Supreme Court thinks we're the Supreme Court, we're supreme, we make the rules of the game. You understand? That's how some of these guys are. So Alito is just straight up wrong. Just wrong. Completely wrong here. And he knows it. After all, he's a constitutional scholar. Now, the timing of the interview suggests that its release was coordinated with efforts to block the Judiciary Committee's inquiry, White House had said. Quote, on the Senate Judiciary Committee, we have heard in every recent confirmation hearing that it would be improper to express opinions on matters that may come before the court, he wrote. In this instance, Justice Alito expressed an opinion on a matter that could well come before the court. Alito's comments run afoul of U.S. judicial canon and an April statement of ethical principles and practices signed by all 9 justices, White House added. White House, joined by other Senate Democrats, requested that Chief Justice Roberts of the Supreme Court Judicial Conference, quote, take whatever steps are necessary to investigate the affair and provide the public with prompt and trustworthy answers. These are all things that are 100% necessary. If Congress, if Republicans, if Democrats want anybody to have any sort of faith in the Supreme Court, one of the things that it needs to do is rein in the Supreme Court's unethical practices. Otherwise, it's just a super legislative position that can check legislators into the future based on happenstance. And why should we listen to a Supreme Court that's just another political body? It can do whatever the fuck it wants, that has no oversight over its actions. We shouldn't. I am not one to say that we should get rid of the Supreme Court. I like the idea of a justice, of a judge deeming what is and is not constitutionally sound based on actual evidence and what have you. Even if it's temporary, right? Even if it's because it's a check on power. You don't want the executive going roughshod over the entire legislative process and doing whatever it wants. You don't want Congress to violate the rights of people, etc. You want these different checks in there, right? So I'm not one to say get rid of the Supreme Court. There are countries where their Supreme Court is more of an advisory body, where they make rulings and basically their version of the legislature, so Parliament, generally speaking, basically takes their rulings into advisement and can choose to enforce those or not. That's one way to go about it. You know, give the people a little bit of like, well, the Supreme Court says this, legislative says this. What are you going to do? Well, legislature's still going to do what it wants. If you don't like it, vote in a new legislator, kind of thing, right? That's one way to go about this. I don't think that's the way we need to go about it. But stuff like this makes me lean more that way. It makes me lean more that way. And it needs to be fixed because it is destroying trust in society. It really is. Let's continue on, though. So White House's legislation, if made law, would require the Supreme Court to formally adopt a code of ethics. The High Court is currently not bound by any such document. The new ethical standards would need to be made available for public comment. In addition, the measure would create a review board of federal jurists through which anyone could submit ethics complaints against Supreme Court justices. White House's bill narrowly cleared the Senate Judiciary Panel on an 11-10 party line vote in July. Because Democrats are sharing power 50-50, they have majority in most committees, and this is one of the ones that they have majority in. So there's a power sharing agreement on this, and that's one of the things, and that's why it was 11-10. Now, if this was all Democrats doing these things, I bet the Republicans would be singing a different tune. Now, but to wrap this up, though, the full Senate is expected to take up the bill in the fall legislative session, although jury is still out on whether Democrats will be able to ram the measure through Congress. Chances are they won't be able to. Because of the filibuster. Yay! Making me hate that more and more every day. So. Okay. I'm getting pushed on time here. Jeez. I spent way too much pontificating about the Republican stuff. All right. Let's see. I think I'm going to skip the next section. Yeah, we're going to skip the next section. All right. This concludes our segment on the Supreme Court. Cover that next week. Yeah, we'll cover that in a news bite. Court tells Abbott to remove buoys. Cover that in News Bite. Cover that in News Bite. All right, I'm going to cover some of these in Instagram shorts and stuff. Nikki, if you're watching, I'm sorry. I pontificated way too long on the Republican stuff, but I think it's going to make a good segment, so that's good. I will do some of these other stories as 1 minute off, 1 minute 30-second offs for various platforms. So, yeah, I'll just condense them to a minute. So we'll do it that way. That one's easy to do. That one's easy to do. Yeah. Hold on, I gotta be back. My dog's barking. All right. Well, we're going to have to go ahead and call it a night here. So let's get into our segment, News of the Weird. If this is your first time you've watched us, you might not know that we like to close off our news roundup with some news of the strange, of the weird, of the fun. And this week is no different. So first up, let's talk about this story here, where it's a not so elite at Chinese restaurant chain, at a restaurant chain. So this is a fun little story here. So Business Insider reports that if you want to meet someone making a lot more or a lot less money than you, try to travel to your local full service chain. No, we're being serious here. Restaurant chains like Olive Garden and Applebee's are America's social economic melting pot, according to new research. A paper from Maximum Massenhoff and Nathan Wilmers of the Naval Postgraduate School and Harvard University, respectively, look at where Americans of different classes are more likely to rub shoulders. Quote, the most socioeconomically diverse places in America are not public institutions like schools and parks, but affordable chain restaurants, Massenhoff and Wilmers write. The researchers find that the wealthiest Americans are far and away more likely to encounter just seemingly high-earning peers, meaning that the rich hang out with the rich. And isolation across class is more pronounced in urban and suburban areas. The socioeconomic isolation has grown even more stark since the pandemic. Researchers at the Massachusetts Institute for Technology found that far fewer people visited neighborhoods where residents made significantly more or less than they did in December of 2021 than in 2019. Interactions between people of different socioeconomic backgrounds dropped by up to 30% during that time period, long after COVID lockdowns were lifted, according to tracked cell phone data of more than 1 million people in Boston, Dallas, Seattle, and Los Angeles. But there are some places where Americans of different incomes congregate. The aforementioned restaurants, Applebee's and Olive Garden. Indeed, the sweet spot for cross-class mixing is what the researchers call full-service, low-priced restaurants. That includes places like IHOP, Applebee's, Chili's, and yes, Olive Garden. A higher income person is more likely to meet a lower income person at a fast food restaurant like McDonald's or Wendy's. However, it's not reciprocal effect, since these restaurants tend to see much more of poor people. At places like Panera, poorer Americans are more likely to meet non-poor Americans, but not the other way around. Because it's a little bit of higher end restaurant, and that's not where poor people necessarily eat. As the researchers note, all of that could mean rethinking policy situations for getting Americans from different income brackets to socialize, especially as some areas prioritize cutting back on a number of chain restaurants they allow. After all, research from Harvard economist Raj Chetty has found that being friends with high earners is key to your economic mobility. But many lower earning Americans make friends based on proximity. That's why cross-income areas for socialization are important. You might just meet that rich friend, that's why cross-income areas for socializing are important. You might just meet that rich new friend at a Chili's. So there's some interesting news for you. And finally, in our News of the Weird segment, we will move over to this. The story is about a three-legged bear's Labor Day visit to a home in Lake Mary, Florida. And it comes from WESH2 News.
A Lake Mary family had an unexpected guest this Labor Day weekend, a bear. The family's 13-year-old son and their security system caught the whole thing on camera. West News' Haley Crumble-Home spoke with him about how the bear got into their screened-in patio and helped himself to some White Claws.
Nice. Only in Florida, man.
Oh my God. I've never been this close to a bear.
Maybe you should not
13-year-old
be,
Joseph Diglio was watching TV Sunday. Barking from the family's dog, Bruno clued him in there was something outside.
Oh, what happened to the bear's leg?
Oh my God, there's a literal bear in our patio.
This is the hole the bear ripped open to get inside.
And once in,
He
He went over here to the fridge and got 2 White Claws.
mango and strawberry, in case you were wondering.
Oh, look, he just opened the door. He's about to take the beer. He's about to take the beer.
And while the bear's ability to open the fridge was pretty cool,
that's funny.
it was also kind of concerning.
Once I saw him open the fridge, I got scared that he could open the doors to like the houses.
I feel like I gotta lock all the doors now.
Yeah, you probably should, bro.
Okay, I gotta go lock out my dog.
Only
But
a 13-year-old can react this way.
Bruno that scared the bear away.
Man's best
Part
friend.
living where we live, honestly.
In Seminole County,
True.
Haley Crumble-Home, WESH 2 News.
So that's fun. But with that, my friends, I am sad to say that we are out of time. We know you liked what you heard because you're still with us to the very end. So please smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. We'd like to give special thanks to our Facebook and Discord communities who provide a lot of information about what we cover here through their sharing of news media, links to articles, that sort of thing, and also just talking with us on what they find to be important. And so we like to cover that on our show, hence one of the name Crowdsourced. Also like to give a special thanks to our producer and copy editor, Nikki Adams. Without her, this copy would be a lot less in depth. And so thank you, Nikki, again for doing the copy. We greatly appreciated. For you, those that weren't here at the beginning, I will be at Modern Day Debate Con 4 in Dallas, Texas on November 4th and 5th to debate Sean Fitzgerald, aka Actual Justice Warrior, about some criminal justice issues and some crime issues. What the exact parameters of that debate are still kind of being worked out by Modern Day Debates, but I have been invited to do that and I look forward to it. So if you're going to be in the Dallas area, or if you live in Texas and can make it to Dallas, I'd love to have you show up. We could get a beer together and have a good time. So yeah, that's what we're doing. And as we say, another thing, sorry. On Saturday, I will be on Saturday Night Lights with Tiberius D. Shit, got burps. So I'll be on Tiberius D's show on Saturday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll be doing stuff, doing his show. And then next week, I'll be on Pondering Politics podcast on Wednesday, starting at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, to do a new show. We're going to talk politics and stuff between him and myself and a few other people. I don't know how many people are actually showing up to that, but it's probably around 4 or 5 people or so. If everybody that says they can make it makes it, so it'll be about 4 or 5 people. So that should be a good show. That's going to be a thing that we'll do on a regular basis. And so I'm looking forward to that as well. So as we say, though, my friends at Crowdsource Politics, keep your head up through the political storm.